Okay, this week's question, Mike, why is business change so often met with resistance, and how can I win over my team's mind? Well, look, first and foremost, I think that the way when you even went to this question is structured. Let's address both points. One is from the standpoint of organizational change being met with resistance, and then the other side of getting, let's say, buy-in from your team. So change as a whole, and this is independent of whether it's good change or bad change. Change is change, and change is something that's different. And as much as most people will say that they want to be uncomfortable or pushed outside of their comfort zone, that they want to grow. That is up until the point where somebody is pushed outside of their comfort zone and is given the opportunity to grow, typically. So the fact is, people get used to things, and they get used to certain technology platforms. They get used to certain processes, certain ways of doing things. And when you're implementing some sort of organizational change, whether it's a new technology platform, whether it's a new way of doing things, like I said, whether it's for organizational efficiency, to improve things, to provide a better client experience. It doesn't even matter if it's good or bad. It's just different. And when it's different, that requires somebody to have to learn a new way, to take a new approach, and you have to break homeostasis. At our core as human beings, people want to take the path of least resistance, meaning that, if you get used to something and then you have to do it differently, which requires learning new skills, capabilities, training, whatever it is, why, right? Like, I like the old process. I get used to that. So I think the reason why change is often met with resistance is just simply due to the fact that it requires, a learning of new capabilities. It requires an adaptation of some sort. It just requires doing something in a very different way from what somebody was previously used to. But that's not enough of a reason to not implement change. I mean, if there's opportunities to make your business more efficient, if there's opportunities to support your clients at a higher level, to do things in ways that free up your team to operate more strategically and doing less of the, let's say, the mundane data entry and things like that, that's a good thing. That's good for everybody. And when you're positioning this stuff, I think it's also important to state the why and the reasoning behind it. It's never just change for the sake of change. Sometimes change in businesses is for businesses to be able to remain competitive. And a failure to change in any way is almost a recipe for, a very, slow, or in some cases, a quick demise. So, I think for organizations, it's important to be able to remain competitive. And it's important to remain competitive for the reason of it's important to be able to provide stability and consistency to the people within that organization and the clients that depend upon them, right? And the clients and the communities and so on. Now, in terms of the question and the second part of how do I get buy-in from my team when you're driving any sort of organizational change, I think this is more of a mindset question than anything else. So there's the concept of change management, where you're driving change in your organization, and there's like the corporate term change management, and then there's the term of business readiness. So meaning that the organization understands that things are always going to be changing, that technology is always going to be progressing, that the idea of implementing something new is not a bad thing, but that's how it's synonymous with making progress. So if you're having to get people's buy-in, if you're having to do a whole lot of convincing and so on, I mean, think about the energy and time that takes, and it's the wasted energy, if you will, versus just ensuring that there's alignment. And this is not to say that you should surround yourself with yes people that agree to everything you do, and that don't ever want to voice any type of concern or any diversity of opinion, which I think is actually a very, very good thing. But this is more so the fact of, like, if you are having to play the convincing game every time you're going to be implementing something new in the business, it's going to be very slow going. Let's just put it that way. The amount of friction, the amount of time that will take versus just having alignment. So sometimes you have to look at this from the standpoint of, what percentage of the people in your organization are you having to win over consistently, right? And chances are, in my experience, that those generally are not the most accountable people. They're not the most growth-minded people. They're going to dig their heels in regardless. I mean, even if the change that you're proposing is going to be wonderful for them and it's going to make significant improvements, that some people just don't like change for the sake of change. But looking at that from the standpoint of, where is that feedback coming from? Are these the people that are the most accountable, the most committed, the most engaged? And are they resisting it because maybe it's not a great idea? Or is it coming from the least accountable people that are just going to dig their heels in regardless? So if the reality of it is that you shouldn't necessarily have to be winning over anyone when driving the right organizational change, which is going to make things better for the team, your company as a whole, your clients, your communities, and so on. But if you have to figure out, okay, how do I win them over? Okay, How do I win over somebody that just does not agree with the change? You can explain the why. You can give the business case. You can explain how it would benefit them, how it would grow from them. You can lead a horse to water, right? But it doesn't mean they're going to agree. And guess what? You're the entrepreneur. You're the business owner. Unfortunately, all final decision making comes down to you. So sometimes you just got to do it. And I found that, I've had people resist. We used to do team chat and G chat, and then we moved to GroupMe, and I got a bunch of resistance. And then we moved to this platform called Slack, and you would not even believe the amount of resistance that I got. You believe we're moving from GroupMe to Slack? Now they love it. They love Slack. It's the same thing when we move project management platforms. It's the same thing when we move billing platforms and so on. Sometimes there's that initial resistance just because it's different. But when people see their lives get easier and they see their jobs get more efficient and all these different things that are taking place, you'll find that sometimes people come around. So don't forget, you're 100% in control. If you're the business owner and the business leader, sometimes you have to ask yourself, do you need 100% buy-in to drive the right organizational change to keep and maintain a level of competitiveness for your organization?